things about if there's a problem. So if there's a fire alarm, it's a real fire alarm, please meet with Queen Victoria. We are being live streamed, so if members of the public don't want to be seen by the camera, it's at the back of the room, don't turn round. But the rest of us are being live streamed. So welcome to everybody. First of all, before we do anything else, let's just go through. Colleagues, are there any apologies for absence? I know that Councillor Stagg is not here and I'm substituting for her because this covers the area where she lives and therefore she has a conflict. Do we have any other apologies? No. Okay. Declarations of members' interests. Are there any that need to be declared? No. Lovely. Okay. So the point of this meeting is to look at the traffic regulation order consultation on the HC Kendall Avenue area for residents car parking and to receive the report. I think the sensible thing probably to do is to hear the report from the council officers first, then ask people who've come to speak to have their say and then move from there. And I was going to do the people who asked to do deputations first before I come to colleagues who are spokespeople for that. So, welcome. Kevin, if you would like to run through your report.
Thank you, Leader.
Oh, hold on. Yes, no, very good point. Sorry, I've been told we need to say who we are for the millions of people who are watching, or not. But anyway, hello, I'm Gerald Vernon-Jackson. I'm leader of the council, and I'm the decision-making here today. Simon.
My name is Councillor Simon Bosher. I'm the Conservative spokesman for Traffic and Transportation. And I'm Councillor Graham Heaney. I'm the Labour spokesman for Traffic and Transportation.
Rob.
Hi, Councillor Robert New, and I am here on behalf of my residents to make a deputation objecting to this proposal.
Okay, and Rob, you're a Cotton Ward councillor, is that right?
That's correct.
Thanks. Ben?
I'm Councillor Benedict Swan, representing Copner, and I'm here again to speak on behalf of my residents.
I'm Councillor Terry Norton. I'm a Drayton and Farlington councillor. However, I've been involved in this process. I've had a view on it for the last few years, so I'm here to object.
Okay, lovely. I have as well on my list Councillor Darren Saunders. Are you coming to say anything, Darren? In which case you need to come and sit at the table.
I shall. I'm Darren Sanders. I'm one of the ward councillors for the area under discussion, and I have come to support the decision of my residents.
Excellent.
I'm Alison Lawler from the parking team.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin McKee. I'm the parking manager for Portsmouth City Council.
I'm Pam Turton. I'm the Assistant Director for Transport at PCC.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
And the late Wayne.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager.
Wayne, it's lovely to see you as always, but as I don't see any financial bits in this, do you need to be with us? Because I'm sure there is pound coins you can be money you can be counting somewhere else.
I'm here in case there are any actual financial questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The report details the various consultations we've conducted in the HC Kendall Avenue area. In paragraph 5.2 is the findings from the formal consultation, which is the statutory consultation, and it indicated in our assessment that 57 people overall supported the proposal and 135 objected, and from within the area itself there were 44 in support and 69 against. So the recommendation of the report is that the HC Kendall Avenue area residence parking zone proposed under the TRO is not implemented other than set out in the second recommendation, and the second recommendation is to implement a short length of the proposed no waiting at any time, which is double yellow lines, in Moneyfield Lane northwards from its junction with Keswick Avenue for 1 metre. So it's a small bit of yellow line round that corner to stop people blocking a drop curb. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so shall we start with Darren, as you are the councillor for the area concerned, and then walk down the table?
I'm happy to listen to my colleagues first.
No, I think at your local you
Right,
go first.
okay, that's okay, fine, thank you for that, Gerald. So I've come along to support the decision of my residents not to implement this parking zone. It's been crucial since, for the last couple of years, that it's very important that in parking you actually support the will of the people. We've had zones that were brought in with the backing of local people and taken away without the backing of local people. We've had zones whereby nobody wants to pay, and then people suddenly found that part of the zone was going to still stay rather than all be taken away. So the will of the people is rather important when it comes to parking. This hasn't come out of the blue, I have to say. For 12 years, myself and Councillor Stagg have put up with people, particularly in the southern part of this area, roads by Station Road, saying they wanted something done about the parking problem. And so in 2012, those roads in the south of the area were put on a list. And frankly, that's when this should have been done. But it wasn't. And in 2018, officers then said it was important not just to cover the roads around Station Road, because Councillor Stagg asked again about the roads around Station Road, but to cover a larger area, which wound up including the road where she lives. So this hasn't come out of the blue, and even in the informal survey, about 70% of people supported the idea of the parking zone. But what became clear, as Councillor Stagg and I talked to people, was that when push came to shove, as happens sometimes, people actually thought that what was being proposed just wouldn't work. And it actually went beyond the Times, which was the problem in Graham's ward in St Jude. People liked the zone but didn't like the Times. It went beyond charging, and it went to a belief that the zone simply wouldn't work for what was around. And I think there are many lessons that can be learnt from this, and I hope the parking team will learn them. But I think it is important to have the will of the people. Now, Gerald, as you know, you and I are consistent about this. I remember when the zone that Councillor Healy was involved in, the MD zone, we had Councillor Linda Symes, who said, and I quote, that the result, which showed that 212 out of 327 residents were in favour of parking zone, was not representative. You're saying that 64.8% of people are in favour, but less than 20% actually replied, and that was somehow a reason not to go ahead with it. I disagreed with that then, and I disagree with that concept now. Only 1 person in 6 replied to the survey, and only 9.5% of all the people who live in the zone didn't want it. But that is democracy. We can't have, as we may have, a city-wide referendum that still keeps in some parking zones, as has happened previously. We've got to make sure that when people say no, they say no. I would also say one final thing, Gerald. Many people actually thought this was a done deal when talking to people. They thought it was going to come in regardless. There will be many people in the area who will be deeply surprised and deeply shocked. But that's what people wanted, and as everywhere else under this administration, that's what they're going to get. I would also support the notion of the slight extension around Moneyfield Lane. Several people complained to myself and Councillor Stagg about the problems there, and that is something that I think they will welcome. So, not for the first time, I support the recommendations, in this case, to reject the proposed parking zone. Thank you, Gerald.
Thanks very much indeed, Darren. Shall we go to our colleagues who are closest in Cotton Ward? Rob or Ben, who do you want to go first? Okay. This is age before beauty, or?
Bless you. Thank you, Chair. So we're here today on behalf of residents who do not want the zone, the majority. The HC zone was dreamed up, I believe, as a political election wheeze way back when. Never in my life have I seen City Council officers bounce into quite difficult situations publicly where they've had to accept political consultations as part of a working policy report and further consultation, in my opinion, which was duplicitous in the form that it was presented to Copner residents in attempting to repaint the proposed HC parking zone as one that will benefit them by labelling it as the Copner parking zone proposals. While residents within the Baffins Ward boundary area may identify as Copner, the Cabinet member and administration knew that this was in the Baffins Ward, and nonetheless, the order to officers to mislead Copner residents could have only have come from within. The officers should not have been put into that position. I should not have been put into that position of having to call the Chief Executive, David Williams, on the day of the consultation to make him aware of this deception and then order them to withdraw. I could hear him face-palming down the phone when the officers told him what was being presented. The shoddiness didn't stop there, to the point that Councillor Swan and I had to manually cross out the title of the printed survey and correct it. That was a low in terms of City Council Cabinet member-led operation, in my opinion. Residents on both sides of the Copner Road do not want this zone. The officer's report clearly showed that from the consultation that a majority within the HC zone and outside of the HC zone object to these proposals. Within the zone, a majority of 69 objections to just 44 being in favour, while outside of the zone, and a further 39 people consulted are against the proposals, and further objections were raised, taking the number objecting to 135 as per the report. In total, the objection is 135 strong to just 57 supporting. On that basis, I would urge the Leader of the Council taking this decision today to stand with the residents and to uphold democracy on that basis and to accept the officer's recommendations. The displacement that the HC zone will cause will be miserable for not only my residents but also for Fratton residents and also for Baffins residents potentially. And despite there being talks of a rollout programme, we all know here, being serious, that's going to cause year on year on year of misery and displacement. It's not solving the problem, it's just moving it along. So I'd urge the Leader of the City Council here today, making his decision to support the officer's recommendations and to support residents across this area who have called to object against this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Ben.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon, and thank you for implying that I'm younger than Rob. I'm actually in a state of disbelief that we're even here discussing this issue, what with the clear weight of evidence in opposition of the proposed resident parking zone. Quite frankly, the whole process has been handled in an extremely grubby manner, with Councillor Stagg, the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation, making extremely denigrating and disrespectful comments clearly aimed at Copner residents on a public social media platform, being a particularly shocking episode. I would go as far as saying it shows the utter disdain and disgust that Councillor Stagg clearly has for all community-minded Copner residents, and indeed any community-minded residents of Portsmouth who dare criticise her pet projects. Furthermore, I reiterate my previous comment on this matter that an apology would seem to be in order. It is also my understanding that Councillor Stagg is, or certainly was, resident in the proposed resident parking zone area and therefore should have immediately recused herself from the whole process on the grounds of a clear conflict of interest. This is certainly the position I would have taken had I found myself in the same position, but perhaps my personal ethical code differs from that of Councillor Stagg. The fact she did not recuse herself until quite far down the road in the process speaks volumes. The feeling of the residents of Copner is clear. The proposed parking zone will cause many more issues than it claims to alleviate. Portsmouth has a parking problem, there is no getting away from that. But how, in any way, shape or form, can it be acceptable to compound this issue by creating a situation where potentially hundreds of residents who quite rightly do not want to pay a stealth get-to-work tax, get-to-school tax, get-to-the doctor, dentist or hospital tax are parking outside the zone to avoid doing so? This residents' parking zone will massively increase the parking woes across the Copner area, and I worry particularly for elderly or infirm residents who, as they may not qualify for a disabled parking bay, are likely to have to walk even further to get home after parking their car. I also worry for parents of young children who will potentially have to cross many more roads on their journey home after finding a space. Car ownership is increasing year on year, and this is further compounded by the steady and concerning flow of HMO applications in the Copner area, bringing in more people and, despite views to the contrary, more cars. I realise that there are some residents who would like a residents' parking zone in their area, but the facts are clear on the negative impact, and I don't believe anybody could claim to love Copner whilst at the same time support something that will further inconvenience so many of its residents. It's time to put a stop to these illogical and politically motivated piecemeal residents' parking zones and find a sensible, citywide solution to an issue that affects us all. Please, listen to the residents of Copner, who are our liege lords, and scrap this disastrous residents' parking zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Terry.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to speak very, very briefly on this. I'm not directly involved, but I have been part of these objections for some time now, so I think it's important to say a few words. So I welcome Councillor Sanders being here today, and you know, I think it's the first time I've seen him at one of these HC meetings. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would question where his ward colleagues are. Now, Councillor Sanders states that he, they, you will support the will of the people. He goes on to say that, to quote some of his opposition councillors, so I'm going to do the same. Councillor Jeanette Smith has cited, in regards to residents' parking zones, they are simply not listening to residents. She went on to say that the decisions made by the Liberal Democrats were being made for the benefit of themselves and not for the community. This was quoted in the press. Now, this led to Councillor Smith leaving the Liberal Democrat group, as we know, and forming her own. So I do think there were some frustrations, even from within the ward councillors within Baffins around this area. What followed was a number of mishaps from the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. We had a situation where Councillor Dowling sat in on a meeting and, despite a room full of objections, did exactly what he was told and kind of pushed this through to, to the consultation. And what we're left with is some very stark figures here. So, we all attended the public consultation and residents were outraged. They really, really did not want this to go through, and there are a number of reasons. I'm not going to cite them all, but I will say a few of them. Some of the concerns are that residents will simply park in Copner. Of course, the displacement is bound to happen, and we're already seeing Copner sandwiched in between residents' parking zones. The other concern, and this was mainly from Baffin's residents, and I can quote from when I stood there, it was that people will simply park the opposite side of the railway track, hop over the bridge, and avoid paying for the permits there. So we could be in a situation here where people are walking a long distance on their own of an evening over poorly lit footbridges, etc., because they have no choice or because they want to avoid paying a fee there. Now, this is leading to a sense of becoming a hermit, I think. People don't want to go out of an evening because they are worried they're never going to get a parking space back. So we're holding people prisoners within their own homes. We've seen the mess that's been made in the south with residents' parking zones, and I really, really would hate to think that this is going to, we're not going to learn lessons from what's happening down there and start bringing this up into the north. So at the consultation, one of the things that came up from a number of residents, they said, well, why would the councillors care about Copner? Copner don't necessarily vote for their party, and they don't have Liberal Democrat councillors in Copner. And that was a view that was taken by many of the residents that attended that, and I totally agree with that. In no way should Copner be punished here, based on a decision promised to the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation's neighbours. Now, the key thing here is, if I'm a resident, I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to say, so who decides who gets the zone? And the answer is here in black and white. It states on the council's website, it says here that it is for residents to decide whether the parking problem they experience motivates their contribution to the consultation, and the majority view will prevail. Well, the majority view here is against. In full, it's 135 against to 57 in favour, and in the area itself it's 69 to 44. So surely the leader of the council chairing this meeting today will stand by his words here, and the majority view will prevail. Please do not put this zone through. It's been made an absolute mess, and I think it's time to draw a line under it and do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Interestingly, you said you'd be quicker, but you were significantly longer than either of your colleagues, Terry. But apologies, but that's not unusual, I know. Okay, Graham, Simon.
I'd like to hear what you've got to say first, Leader.
Okay, fine. I'm not going to go ahead and approve this, but the people have clearly said what they want, and they don't want it, so that's fine. In the informal survey, they said they did, and I think it's absolutely right and sensible to go for a formal consultation. Local residents at that point said by 80% of them would like to have a parking zone, and it was right to ask them what their view was in an official consultation. They've now said they don't want it, and therefore we need to listen to that and not implement it, and that's fine. I think it is interesting to see we've just done the consultation 6 months into the parking zone around the Kings, the MD area, where when this came for the official one, just like this, it was pretty close about whether we were going to have a parking zone or not. They've now been, residents have been surveyed about what they think about having their 2-hour parking zone, and lots of people were very unhappy and said it wouldn't work. The result was, I think, 82% of residents said it had made their lives easier and they could park easier. So it clearly worked there, against their expectations.
Is this the meeting that was last month we're talking about?
No. But where the results are published on the website, so anybody can see them. So it seems clear that when people have a zone, they like to keep it. But in this case, people didn't want a zone, and they were not going to get one. So that's an introduction from me, Simon.
Thank you, Leader. I was just listening to the late coming deputation from Councillor Sanders, and it's nice to see that he's had done a bit of a U-turn on this, because actually this was brought back onto the programme at the request of the 3 ward councillors. But this particular one has got, to coin Councillor Swan's phrase, has had a bit of a grubby history, because this is the form part of the report that Councillor Stagg tried to rewrite in a public meeting so she could remove her declaration of interest. And then the Liberal Democrats decided they were going to put out literature blaming me for that particular one, which I thought was absolutely fabulous. But hey-ho, it goes with the territory, I think, on that basis. But Councillor Sanders sort of mentioned the fact that only 9% opposed it, but hey-ho, that's democracy. But of course, when we went through the MF one last month, there was only 6% of the population in favour of that one in that particular area. So that's percentages. We can play percentages till the cows come home, Councillor Sanders. But it is interesting to see that something that you've tried to force through for the benefit of your residents and effectively the misery of the Copner residents, actually your own residents have told you you're wrong, and the fact that the Copner residents are right in this particular instance. I really don't know why this came forward. It goes back to 2009, and there wasn't an appetite for it then, and it was brought back on purely for political reasons in an area where actually Councillor Stagg lived. Now, we can play those cards for as long as it comes, but with the best in the world, I think you're going to make the right decision on this. In fact, that to use Councillor Stagg's phrase, if they don't vote for it, it won't be implemented, and you're actually going to follow the lead of the cabinet member on this particular instance. And I trust you're probably going to approve the double yellow lines. I have no issue with that. I'll defer to the ward councillor on that particular issue. But I think when it comes down to the residents' parking zone, I think this one should be basically rejected.
Thank you. Graham?
Thank you. This was the first scheme I sort of really got involved in other than MD, and I spent part of a July Saturday afternoon just walking around the area, getting a sense of a feel for what it was like before going to the public exhibition that was held in the Methodist Church. And when I walked around the area and I looked at the area, and I actually talked to a couple of people before I went in, and also talked to people at the consultation meeting, the interesting thing that I was trying to find out, and I asked the question of the officers, I said, what is the reason for having this parking scheme proposal here in now? What's the objective problem that people are trying to solve? And I found it quite difficult to get an answer to the question. Now, it's all very well saying, yes, people ask for it, and that's fine. But I think that what this comes down to in the end is there is actually no objective reason why we need a parking scheme in this area at all. There are no external pressures on this area from outside. There are no commuters, there are no railway stations, there are no businesses, there are no whatever. It's not causing a major problem. This is all to do with the residents in the area who have their own vehicles. There is occasional pressure on the schools, and interestingly, I've looked at some of I went through all of the proposals, the people saying they were in favour, and a number of them are actually saying things like being able to park at 3 a.m, school parking. None of this will be affected by the proposed scheme. You would have to have a scheme much bigger. And of course, the other issue that comes out of this is that inevitably, when you bring a scheme in, some people will decide they don't wish to purchase a permit, or they don't wish to register a second vehicle, or whatever, and they will move their vehicles to adjacent roads. And it was very clear to residents that I spoke to, some of whom were outside the area, that that was the fear they had, that once this scheme came in, then there would be an inevitable creep because no pressure would be put on adjacent roads, and then they would be forced to have to consider a scheme, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And so on. So in a sense, I did pose the question to the executive member at the time that when this came to a decision, obviously she wasn't going to be able to make a decision, that a decision would have to be made as to whether objectively there was a reason for this. And I was hoping that, yes, there is a democratic element here, people saying they want it. What if people had said yes by a narrow margin? I wonder what the reaction would be. I suspect that this would be going through. Even though there is no objective reason for this. And this would have then created the knock-on consequences. Luckily, it appears that the residents have seen that this scheme will not affect them. It will not create one extra parking space in those areas. It will not create one extra place for residents. The problem that exists will not be solved by this parking scheme. Their problems cannot be solved by this parking scheme. However, it appears that the administration would have brought it in if people wanted it, because even though it didn't solve a problem, and it created further problems, and that's the reason, that's the problem I have with the way the administration is dealing with these parking problems, is they say, just because people want it, therefore they're going to give it to them. But sometimes people want contradictory things. If you look at what people are asking for on some of these things, they're actually not going to solve the problems they're actually talking about. And you have to sometimes be able to stand up and say, actually, this isn't going to solve your problems, but I'm not entirely surprised at the lack of courage that elected members in those areas aren't prepared to tell the residents, actually, this is not going to solve your problem. I think sometimes as elected members we have to be honest with residents. We have to be a bit like a lawyer. A lawyer who represents their client is going to give them the best possible advice for their case. Sometimes you have to go to residents and say, actually, you haven't got a really strong case here, and this isn't going to solve your problem. And I think you sometimes have to be honest about that. So I'm pleased in a sense that the residents have obviously seen through this. I know people have seen the common sense that this is not going to work, and so should be rejected. And hopefully this will call a halt to any extensions of schemes in this particular area, because they won't solve any of the problems that residents have.
Okay, colleagues. We also have a range of written deputations, which we also need to officially take note of as well. So, colleagues, thanks very much indeed for this. I think from the results of the informal survey, where 80% of people in this area said they wanted a parking zone, it was absolutely right for residents to be consulted. And I'm sorry, I am of the view that if councillors can do something that local people want, then that's what they should do. I think too often in this country we suffer from the arrogance of politicians who say we know better than local residents and we're going to do unto you what we think is fit for you, even if you don't like it. So I'm sorry, I prefer to go on the lines of supporting. But Graham, I do recognise that that your colleagues again in the King's area were not keen on this coming forward, and residents have said absolutely clearly that it's made an enormously positive difference in their lives to be able to park around the King's Theatre, and have endorsed the action taken very strongly. So I'm pleased with that. Whenever somebody has tried to take a parking zone away that residents have had, every single time, and I know Councillor Bosch's colleague, the late Councillor Elcombe, did remove several parking zones without consulting local residents. Local residents were absolutely furious, and when given the vote, they said that was wrong and that they should have their parking zone back, and they're overjoyed to have it back. So, but it is absolutely right where people say they don't want one, but they don't get it. And therefore I'm happy to support the views of local residents and support the recommendations on the report as written. Okay, thank you very much.